story recapped here. Today I'm gonna explain an action, horror, and thriller film called 30 Days of Night. Spoilers ahead, watch out, and take care. In Barrow, Alaska, the people prepare for a month-long polar night when the sun doesn't rise. Near the town, a stranger stares at a ruined ship in the frozen ocean before heading to Barrow. Nearby, sheriffs Eben Olsen and Billy Kitka investigate a pile of burnt satellite phones in the snow. Meanwhile, in town, people catch flights to avoid isolation for the next 30 days, while others stay behind and prepare for it. Unknown to them, their snow dogs in the kennel bark furiously as a mysterious person stabs them. The sheriffs drive back when Eben receives a report that John Reed's snow dogs have been killed. Eben heads there to investigate and vows to John that he'll catch the culprit. Elsewhere, Eben's wife and town's fire marshal, Stella, makes final checks before she flies out of Barrow, seemingly avoiding Eben as they're in the middle of a divorce. Later on, she drives to the airport to catch a flight, but a bulldozer crashes into her car. The driver apologizes, noting that his brakes were damaged. Desperate, she calls Eben for help, but he claims to be busy, so he sends Billy instead. Billy soon arrives and takes Stella to the airport, but it's already closed when they get there. Meanwhile, Eben goes to the police station, where his younger brother Jake and his grandmother Helen also work. Helen reports about vandalism at the utilidor, so Eben goes there. As he arrives, his friends, Carter and Wilson, tell him that someone purposely destroyed the helicopter. With the peculiar series of cases, Eben suspects that someone is trying to prevent Barrow from reaching and communicating with the rest of the world. In the town's cell tower, Gus hears a suspicious noise. Curious, he stands up, but the lights suddenly go out. With a torch in hand, he goes outside. However, a group surrounds him until one attacks and bites down his neck. At the diner, the stranger orders raw meat and alcohol, but when the waitress denies him, he threatens her. Luckily, Eben arrives to defuse the situation and invites the stranger to talk outside. The stranger retaliates but stops when he feels a gun at the back of his head, held by Stella. The stranger quiets before attempting to attack her, but Eben pins him to the counter. Eben and Stella then detain the stranger at the station, where Stella greets Helen and Jake. Somewhere around town, 3 pipeline workers get off their shifts and discuss where to spend the night. However, one of them gets dragged by an unknown figure. The others stare in confusion until his mangled body is dumped in front of them. Back at the station, Eben interrogates the stranger about how he got into Barrow, but he dismisses the questions. Helen notices that the internet is down, and when Eben checks the phone, the line is cut as well. Shortly after, the town's electricity goes off, leaving only the generators working. Eben heads to the cell tower to call for help, but when he arrives, he finds a trail of blood on the snow. To his horror, Eben sees Gus' decapitated head on a spike. Eben urgently returns to the town and tells everyone to stay indoors. Later, John's wife, Allie, makes dinner in their home when someone breaks in through the window. Hearing her scream, John sprints and sees her being dragged outside. He follows and sees her getting dragged under the house. He aims his rifle, but someone scratches his face. The attacker then pulls Allie under the adjacent house, but John grabs her hand. He tries to pull her out, but the attacker drags Allie into the darkness. Back at the station, the stranger warns that everyone will die. Annoyed, Jake throws a game piece at him, but the stranger claims he can use the piece to pick the lock. Jake rushes in to retrieve it, allowing the stranger to strangle him through the bars. Luckily, Eben arrives and shoots the man in the arm. He quickly unlocks the cell and handcuffs the stranger onto the bars. Eben interrogates him about Gus's death, but he yells that he doesn't talk to dead men. Grieving, Eben decides to look for the culprit, and Stella volunteers to help. They investigate around town but are forced to exit the car when something blocks the road ahead. Seeing what's ahead, Stella quickly tells Eben to get in the car. As they attempt to flee, someone jumps on the roof, so Eben shoots. However, this doesn't deter the person, so Stella hits the brakes, and the bloodthirsty threat falls off the car before they drive off. On their way back, they receive a call from Helen, who's screaming for help. Eben and Stella quickly reach the station, only to find it messy with blood splattered on the walls. Helen and Jake are nowhere to be found, but the stranger is still in his cell, so Eben asks him what happened. Instead, the stranger rambles on how they didn't take him, so he asks Eben to kill him. Distraught, Eben lingers at the thought until Stella convinces him not to do it. In the darkness, the mysterious group gathers. Their leader, Marlowe, reminds them to remove the heads from their victims' bodies to prevent them from turning. Seeing the situation in the town, Marlowe knows that they should have invaded it sooner. The rabid creatures soon attack anyone they find, turning Barrow into a bloody graveyard. A group of survivors, along with Jake, gathers at the diner, confused and horrified at the creatures attacking their town. Eben arrives with Stella, and he's relieved relieved to see Jake among the survivors. They discuss how to avoid detection, so Carter suggests heading to the utilidor. However, the building is at the edge of town, so a lady suggests hiding in Charlie Kelso's attic, whose pull-down ladder is hidden. Eben volunteers to be a distraction to get the others there safely, and Stella insists on joining him. They drive around town to be bait, but their car halts suddenly. The creatures lift their car and attack. Eben shoots, but Marlowe steals his gun. The creatures finally flip the car over, trapping the humans under. Suddenly, their neighbor Brower storms in with his bulldozer, running over the creatures. Immediately, Stella and Eben get into the bulldozer, so Brower drives away. The trio joins the others in the attic. As they mull over the situation, Jake recounts how the creatures fed on Helen's blood as if they were vampires. The others are skeptical of vampires being real, however. Instead, Eben focuses on their survival, insisting on sleeping in shifts and rationing their supplies. Back in the station, Marlowe and his lover, Iris, visit the stranger, commending him for doing his task. The stranger cries in fear, knowing what's to come, so Marlowe hugs his head as if to comfort him before snapping his neck. For the next 6 days, the survivors stay hidden in the attic. Given their situation, Stella grimly notes that it's good that Eben didn't want children. Wilson's father, Isaac, wakes up and searches for his wife. Wilson reminds him that his mother died years ago, so they lull him back to sleep. Suddenly, they hear noise from outside. Stella checks through the small hole on the boarded window and sees the vampires ransacking the houses. The others insist that they have to leave before they're found, but Stella and Eben agree that it's too risky. The discussion leads to an argument until Eben diffuses the situation, insisting that fighting amongst themselves will get them killed faster. Still, he knows the risks of staying, so he suggests going to a nearby store, then rushing to the utilidor after. However, they need to wait until the next blizzard to conceal them from the creatures. The following night, a young woman named Kristen starts calling for help on the streets. Carter insists on rescuing her, but Eben points out that the vampires are waiting on the rooftops nearby. He concludes that Kristen is being used as bait. When nobody comes out to rescue her, the vampires approach her menacingly. Kristen begs for her life, stressing that she tried her best, but there's no one left. She falls to her knees as the vampires don't respond to her pleas. When she begs for God, Marlowe ridicules her. As the vampires gather around her, Eben rushes out of the house, still desperate to save the woman. On his way, he hears someone calling out from under one of the houses. He spots John, but tells him to stay low while he goes to save Kristen. Before he reaches her, however, the vampires take turns slashing at her body, bleeding her before consuming her blood. Failing to save Kristen, Eben goes to John and pulls him out from under the house. Although when he looks at his face, Eben gets startled, seeing the vampire's features on him. John staggers towards him, and for a moment, Eben takes pity on him and helps him up. However, John's vampirism makes him rabid, so he attacks. Eben stumbles on a swing set, letting John get tangled with its chains. Eben finds an axe nearby and strikes John's neck repeatedly until he dies. Tired and grieving, Eben collapses back at the house. While everyone is resting, Isaac heads down on his own, wanting to go home. Stella and Wilson notice and try to stop him from leaving. Isaac struggles from their grasp and cries. He asks to go to the bathroom before returning to the attic, so they let him. However, Stella and Wilson soon realize that he escaped through the window. Stella stops Wilson from running after him, but he knocks her down and escapes. The commotion wakes Eben, so he heads down and finds Stella. Before they can move, a vampire walks into the house, forcing them to hide in the bathroom. The vampire looks around and approaches the bathroom, but Wilson calls out to his father outside, so the vampire goes out to kill him instead. Eben and Stella return to the attic, where Stella feels guilty for letting Wilson leave. Eben comforts her that it's hard to stop someone when their family is at stake. Stella recalls that they were like that once. Suddenly, thuds are heard from the roof. Eben checks the window and confirms that the creature above is gone and it's snowing hard outside. When the blizzard hits, they head out to the store, hidden by the wind and snow. At the store, they hurriedly gather supplies but stop upon hearing a noise. To their horror, a vampire girl is feeding off a man's neck. The survivors run to Eben, but the girl disappears. Eben walks closer to the shadows with his axe in hand, and the girl suddenly launches at him. The survivors team up to pin the girl to a wall, and Jake chops off her head. When it grows quiet, Jake is frozen upon realizing that he just killed a child. Eben comforts him, and Brower assures him that he did the right thing. The snowstorm soon ends, leaving everyone trapped in the store. Days later, Eben suggests that they move into the police station. Still, they need a distraction. Stella realizes that the vampires must have attacked during the polar nights because they can't survive the sunlight. Jake confirms that Helen has UV lights to grow plants in her house, so Eben volunteers to cause a distraction and fight back using the lights. Soon, Soon, Eben bolts out of the store and bangs his axe to create noise and attract the vampires. The vampires run towards him while Stella leads the others to the station. However, another vampire attacks one of them. They hurry away, leaving the fallen man behind. Eben heads inside the house and turns the generator on. He prepares the UV light just as the vampires surround the house. Marlo gives Iris the signal to attack first, but when she does, Eben greets her with a UV light. Iris collapses back, shrieking as her skin burns. Meanwhile, Stella and the others arrive at the station, and she immediately contacts Eben through the walkie-talkie. Eben tells her that the UV light worked, but the vampires turn the generator off. The lights go out, forcing him to sprint from the back door while the other vampires chase after him. Brower grabs the walkie-talkie from Stella, and he tells Eben to head to Rogers Avenue. Meanwhile, Marlo comforts Iris, who's still writhing in pain. He reminds her that what can be broken must be broken. She nods, accepting her fate. Marlo shields her eyes before ending her agony. While Eben escapes, Brower drives a ditch driller to saw through the vampires. With the vampires at his tail, Brower drives the vehicle into a shop. He limps out of the vehicle with explosives in hand. The vampires gather around, waiting for the moment to attack. Brower's rifle jams, so he abandons it and lights a flare. He then drops the flare into his explosives, erupting the store into flames. Eben watches this with heartbreak and leaves. However, Brower crashes out of the window still alive. He collapses in the snow, where Marlo stares at him with disgust. Marlo steps on Brower's head and crushes his skull. Eben safely arrives at the station, grieving his lost friends. His reunion with the others is cut short when Carter reveals that he was bit. He already feels the symptoms of his change, so he pleads to be executed. Mournful, he recounts how his family died in a car crash. He wanted to join them for so long, but couldn't bring himself to end his own life. Now, he has a good reason to die, so he begs Eben not to let him turn. Having already lost so many of his friends, Eben is too tired and emotional to argue. Away from the other's sight, Eben ends Carter's life. On the 27th polar night, they notice a light from the house nearby, so Eben and Stella head there to check. Inside, they find Billy, who confesses that he killed his daughters and wife to spare them from the vampires. However, as he was about to end himself, he ran out of bullets. Eben and Stella take him to the station but find that the place is empty. They head to the utilidor, where they assume the others went. Halfway through their journey, they see a little girl named Gail walking in the open. Despite her husband's warning, Stella grabs Gail, but a vampire appears. With no choice, Eben fends the vampire off while the others escape. However, Billy separates from Stella and Gail and hides out of fear. Eben runs to put distance between the vampire and the others. After losing the vampire, Eben arrives at the utilidor and reunites with the others, but Stella and Billy aren't there yet. Meanwhile, Marlo finds oil and declares that they cannot let the humans discover that they exist. Soon, Billy reaches the utilidor, unaware that a vampire is following him. While he's searching for the others, the vampire attacks him. The others hear the screams, so Eben arrives and strikes the vampire with the axe. The vampire fights back and pins Eben against the metal grinder. Billy lunges forward, pushing the vampire into the grinder. However, his arm gets crushed as well. Eben tries to help him but discovers that he's also turning, so he swings his axe, ending Billy's suffering. On the 30th polar night, the survivors host a tiny celebration in anticipation of the oncoming sunrise. Suddenly, Stella calls from the walkie-talkie, revealing that she and Gail are under a nearby car. It's only a matter of time until the night ends, so Eben reassures his wife that they'll see the sunrise together. However, the vampires soon drench the town with oil and set it on fire to erase any evidence of their existence. The fire burns down the town, reaching close to where Stella and Gail are hiding. Seeing this, Eben realizes that if Stella leaves the car, the vampires will kill her. If she stays, she'll burn. Desperate, Eben takes Billy's blood and injects it into himself, stressing that they can't fight the vampires while they're human. Seeing him turn into a vampire, the others ponder about killing him, but Jake defends his brother. As the vampirism takes him over, Eben bids his brother farewell before leaving. On the streets, Eben walks to Marlo, disregarding his horde of vampires. Marlo accepts the challenge, so Eben tries to grab him, but he easily gets backhanded into the ice. Marlo repeatedly beats and slashes Eben. Despite being beaten down, Eben yells for Stella to escape. Eben continues to fight back, but Marlo breaks his wrist and knocks him down. Just as Marlo lunges for the final blow, Eben's eyes turn black, and he drives his fist into Marlo's head, killing him. Seeing their leader's defeat, the other vampires flee. Realizing what he'd done to himself, Stella approaches him tearfully and warns him about the dawn. Eben, however, has accepted his fate. He later waits for the sunrise with Stella. They hold on to each other and share one last kiss. Finally, the sun rises, and Stella holds him as he turns into ash.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.